So what I have right here is a pretty typical grocery store tomato. If I threw this really hard against that wall, it breaks the wall, not the tomato. Why? Because this is one tough tomato. You see, this tomato was bred, engineered, and designed to survive the US food system. It was bred to have a tough skin, so it's not damaged by mechanical harvesters and processing equipment. It was engineered to endure the rigors of long-haul logistics, and it was designed to look good on a shelf. All this so you and I can get this tomato for a really low price, any time of the year. You see, we've designed the food for the system instead of the other way around. Now, what's really, when you think about it, what's really kind of absurd about that is no one here would pick this tomato over one you grew in your backyard, right? But I'll tell you, that's not the craziest part, because we throw away a shocking percentage of those tomatoes. In fact, the US Department of Agriculture tells us that 40% of all food that farmers produce is thrown away. Now, as a kid who grew up on a family farm, kills me, because I know how hard we worked to make that food. In fact, this is my younger brother who's still on our family farm, out with his little daughter, irrigating and harvesting the crop. The estimate is something approaching $300 billion of food is what we throw away every year in this country. And the ugly corollary? Food waste makes up 1/3 of what's going into landfills today. The EPA estimates that it amounts to hundreds of billions of pounds of food getting hauled to the dump each and every year. It's an environmental hot mess that gives off enormous amounts of methane, not to mention the wasted resource that it represents. But you know, those are just the symptoms. Where it actually happens is in the big food system. And our food system is this kind of complex thing that got created in the 1950s and really hasn't materially changed since. So what can be done? Now, you've probably all heard the catchphrase, follow the money, as a way to get to the bottom of a complicated scheme. And so here's what I think. If you want to get to the bottom of the issue, if you want to fix a $300 billion system that's throwing away all this food, you follow the waste back into the system to understand how and where it happens. And then if you can figure out how to capture that food, well, I think you gain some real insight into how to transform the system. That's what I've been doing for the last number of years. I've been following the waste back into the system. So let me share today a little bit of what I've learned. First, the food system is really good at moving a lot of food. It's just not particularly good at being flexible. It's kind of a pretty rigid 1950s style system in a 21st century world. So let me unpack that a little bit more, starting off with a little historical perspective. If you look at the food system before the 1940s, almost all food was local. You would have local produce companies that would grow food and contract with local grocers, local dairies, local egg companies, and so on. Now, sure, there have been some national brands around for a long time. Van Camp Pork and Beans, founded in 1851. But again, the food system was really overwhelmingly local. So the issue with this local system, well, it was largely seasonal and not terribly consistent. And so in the 1940s and 50s, we saw the creation of the industrial food system. It's a top-down hierarchical system of long hauls, all organized around a hub-and-spoke kind of a model. It involves gathering enormous amounts of food to large manufacturing and distribution centers, and then shipped all the way back out to the tens of thousands of grocery stores across our country. You may be aware that we actually grow a lot of melons in Colorado, out east in the Rocky Ford area. So let's follow the waste of the melons. About 5 to 10% of the melons actually get left in the field at the farm. Another 10% or so of the melons get culled out, abandoned, lost at the packing shed. Those that actually make it into cartons, well, they get shipped to a fruit company in California for a little bit more processing, and then they get shipped all across the nation to these large distribution centers, and again, ultimately, to grocery stores. Because of this long-haul system, another 20% or so gets lost, and that gets us to 40% wasted. And by the way, yes, if you're wondering, those melons that get shipped from grown in Colorado, shipped to California, a significant percentage of them get shipped all the way back to Colorado. Yeah, I know you couldn't actually make this up, right? Then there are those confusing dates. By the way, did you know that the only dates that are actually regulated by the federal government is baby formula? That's it. And the dates have almost nothing to do with food safety. They are overwhelmingly applied by the manufacturers, and they are crazy conservative. But what do those dates even mean? Best by? Sell by? More delicious by? I mean, they're just confusing, right? And this actually adds to more waste, because if a product is short date, industry speak, meaning it doesn't have very much time left on the date, it won't get pushed out to the grocery store. It just gets thrown away. And then there's, our system the food system has really adapted to this abundance expectation in our society. You and I have come to a place where we expect everything all the time in the grocery store. In fact, the accepted wisdom of the grocery industry is that if you or I walk into a grocery store to buy a specific item, and they're out of that item, there's a 40% chance on that one event that we will change our preferred grocery store. And so the stores, not wanting to lose you as a customer, strive to always have everything all the time. What's more, the freaking tomato has to look perfect. Anything that is just slightly out of that kind of arbitrary, perfect cosmetic standard, it gets thrown away. The abundance expectation, the tomatoes, results in a requirement for oversupply. Because again, if you have to have everything all the time, then the only way you can do that is to significantly oversupply the system, again, resulting in more waste. Then, finally, local food. Farmers and ranchers struggle to get a fair shake from the big food system. So while there's a lot of talk about farm to table, the industrialized food system makes it almost impossible for farmers to get access to their local markets. Sangre's Best Beef, up in the mountains in West Cliff, Colorado. Ranch owner and cowgirl Elin produces hundreds of head of beef every year. And it is a wonderful product, grass-fed, natural beef, great stuff. But she has a hard time getting a fair shake from the big food system. And so she sells some of her beef direct to consumers and some to local independent markets. But these outlets really can't take all the supply that she has. But she's not big enough to actually break into the big food system. What's more, the industrialized food system really only wants some of the cuts of beef. So parts like tongue or beef knuckles, largely lost in the system and thrown away. I could go on, but you get the point, right? This antiquated, kind of outdated 1950s system, confusing dates, our abundance expectation that leads us to oversupply, and local food lost in the system, all this and more contributes to massive waste. In all these cases, there is a common root cause, a key ingredient that's missing from the system, and that's agility. As I said at the start, our food system is really good at moving a lot of food. It's just not good at being flexible, at being agile, especially at these points where waste happens in the system. So how can we bring agility to the big food system? That's really the core question that I've been grappling with for the last 4 years. Given the fact that hundreds of billions of dollars is getting lost, I thought there had to be an economic opportunity in there somewhere. And so what we're doing at Food Maven initially is we're focusing on this arbitrage opportunity. And arbitrage is really just a fancy word for capturing something that's getting lost where value can be recovered. What we've figured out is how to capture and sell this lost food. For our suppliers, this means reclaimed revenues from food that they were otherwise going to, perfectly good food that they were going to throw away. And then we sell at a discount to our food service buyers. So we're selling to restaurants, institutional kitchens, commercial food businesses. For whatever doesn't rapidly sell in our system, we donate to our charity partners for hunger relief. After all, when you think about it, I mean, it's crazy that anybody in the United States would not have enough or enough quality food to eat when we're throwing away hundreds of billions. And then for the small percentage that's not fit for donation, we seek more economically enlightened and environmentally sound options than landfills. So, thank you. Thank you. We really are passionate about what we do and view that we're trying to be good for profits, good for people, and good for the planet. So how do we do this? What's different about what we're doing? Well, we're actually leveraging kind of best practices and creating an online digital marketplace. We're applying all of the big data technologies and techniques to optimize everything, and we're creating this very flexible, agile, local logistics system. We've built systems and technology to do all of the best practices on food handling and delivery. And I realize it sounds a little bit complicated, but if you think about what Amazon does every single day, Amazon has 400 million products in their inventory. They receive hundreds of orders per second. But somehow, your order ends up on your doorstep in 2 days. And here shortly, with Amazon Prime Now coming to Denver, you'll get it in 2 hours. So imagine with me if we applied that same kind of technology and system sophistication to the food system. That's the kind of agility and flexibility that I'm talking about. I think the future of the food system won't struggle so much to be able to do farm to table, where local farmers will be able to much more seamlessly and easily participate in the system, where the system is designed for the food instead of the other way around. Read better tomatoes. And a more agile system means less waste. And friends, that's good for everybody. It's good economics, it's good for the environment, it's good for farmers and producers. I'm encouraged that we're beginning to see some real signs of this change coming. There's a dramatic increase in new, healthier, local food companies. And it's being met by a consumer awareness and thoughtfulness about the food you're eating and where it comes from. We can no longer accept the unintended consequences of an outdated food system, where hundreds of millions of dollars of food is lost and just accepted as a cost of doing business. We can and we must do better. I invite you to be part of one of the great opportunities of our days, to be better stewards of one of our most fundamental resources, the food that nourishes and sustains us. Thank you.